At 12:27 a.m., Nurse Megan Hart walked out of Cumberland Creek Medical Center carrying her life in a cardboard box. Fired on her last shift, not for stealing, not for lying, for saving the wrong patient the wrong way. And then the night tore open. 2 black helicopters dropped into the parking lot so low the ICU windows rattled in their frames. Dust spun into a storm. Security reached for weapons. Megan just stood there numb, thinking about rent a dead car battery and how doing the right thing can still ruin you. This isn't just a story about medicine or the military. It's about what happens when profit tries to overrule a heartbeat and one exhausted nurse refuses to step aside. Stay with me to the last minute. Then tell me where you're watching from and if you would have done what Megan did. If this hits tap-like, and leave a comment. Before the parking lot became a landing zone and Megan Hart found herself staring into 2 military-grade spotlights, Cumberland Creek Medical Center was doing what it always did at night. It pretended the cracks were cosmetic. It pretended the staff could stretch like rubber. It pretended that if everyone kept moving, nobody would notice how close the place was to breaking. Inside the emergency department, the air carried the stale bite of disinfectant and burnt coffee. The fluorescent panels above the nurse's station flickered in a tired rhythm like a heartbeat that could not quite keep time. The waiting room was half full, the kind of half full that still felt crowded because every chair held a problem that would not wait politely. A young man cradled a swollen wrist and stared at a muted television. A woman in a hoodie rocked a toddler whose cheeks burned with fever. An older man slept upright in a corner chair cap pulled low, smelling of rain and cigarettes. Megan moved through it all with a clipped economy that came from repetition, not cruelty. She had worked nights long enough to know the difference between the sound of boredom and the sound of danger. Boredom was the soft hum of routine, the slow shuffle of paperwork, the occasional groan from a stretcher. Danger had edges. It made conversations shorter. It made hands hover closer to equipment. It made your skin feel like it was listening. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, which usually meant a lull in the bad weather of the day. The day shift left their mess behind and the night shift cleaned it up quietly without ceremony. Megan was the charge nurse, a title that sounded important and often was not. It meant she carried the keys to the supply cabinets, answered the angry phone calls, and made decisions that kept people alive. It did not mean she could approve overtime. It did not mean she could order what the department needed. It did not mean she could tell the building to stop being broken. She checked the monitor on bed 7, where a teenager with a broken tibia lay pale and sweaty, his mother trying to smile through her fear. Megan adjusted the blood pressure cuff and leaned closer so the boy could hear her over the noise. "You did good," she said. "You kept it still. That helps." The boy blinked, breathing through pain. "Am I going to walk again?" Megan met his eyes and let her voice stay steady. "Yes, it will take time, but yes." She moved to the next curtain, where a man with a cough that sounded like gravel waited for a chest X-ray, and then to the far corner where a woman sat rigid on a stretcher, mascara smeared, holding her jaw like it belonged to somebody else. Domestic violence triage had whispered. Megan did not ask why yet. She simply put a warm blanket over the woman's shoulders and watched her flinch as if kindness hurt. At the nurse's station, Kayla Monroe was typing with frantic fingers, her ponytail coming loose strand by strand. Kayla was new enough to still look surprised when the department did not have what it needed, like she had not yet learned to expect disappointment as standard equipment. Dr. Nolan Hayes leaned against the counter with a paper cup of coffee that smelled more like ash than caffeine. His eyes were rimmed red, not from tears, but from too many hours spent under the same lights. When Megan walked up, he watched her face for a second, as if he could read the shift in her posture like a scan. "You look like you're holding up a wall that wants to fall," he said. Megan uncapped her pen and began signing a stack of orders without looking at him. "Walls fall. We just stand in the way until they pick a different direction." Hayes let out a dry sound that might have been a laugh if it had more air in it. That is the most depressing pep talk I've heard this week. It's Tuesday, Megan said. Give it time. Kayla pushed her chair back and held up a form. They denied the supply request again. Megan took the paper. It was stamped in red ink as if that made it official. Denied. Deferred to next cycle. Kayla's eyes were wet with frustration. What was it this time, Hayes asked, though he already knew. Chest tube kits, Kayla said. And another case of sterile suction canisters. Megan's jaw tightened. How many kits are left? Kayla swallowed. 2. Maybe 1 if day shift grabbed 1. Hayes rubbed his forehead. They cannot be serious. They are serious, Megan said. She tapped the paper with the back of her pen. Because serious is easy when you are not the one watching somebody drown in their own chest. Kayla lowered her voice. Admin sent an email about pulse ox sensors too. Megan looked at her. Kayla read it off her screen, her voice hesitant, embarrassed to say it out loud. If a single-use sensor appears intact and clean, staff may disinfect and reuse at the discretion of charge nurse. Megan felt heat rise behind her eyes, the kind of anger that did not flare bright. It settled heavy. Hayes stared at the floor for a second. Randall Pierce wants his quarterly bonus. Megan kept her expression flat because the waiting room could see her from the station and fear traveled faster than infection. Pierce wants a clean spreadsheet. He wants the night shift to stop being expensive. Kayla whispered, but what if it hurt someone? Megan did not answer immediately. She looked down the hallway toward the trauma bays, their doors closed, their lights bright behind the glass. She could hear the faint alarms from another unit, a distant code in progress that was not theirs. The hospital was full of sound even when you thought it was quiet. It will, Megan said finally. That's the part they pretend not to understand. Hayes straightened the coffee cup crinkling in his grip. I tried to push back last week. He told me if I wanted to run a charity I should apply at county. Megan's pen stopped moving. And you? Hayes's shoulders lifted a fraction, a gesture of defeat. I have child support, loans, a license I can't afford to lose. Megan nodded once. She did not judge him. She knew the math of fear. She lived inside it. A phone rang at the station. Megan snatched it up before the second ring. Charge nurse, she said. A tense voice from radiology came through. We're backed up. CT is down to 1 scanner. If you have anything that can wait, send it later. Megan looked at the tracker board. Nothing can wait, she said. But I hear you. She hung up and turned to Kayla. Go check on bed 12, the toddler with fever. Get a temp again and ask Mom if he's had wet diapers. Kayla nodded grateful for a task and hurried off. Hayes watched Megan for a moment. You ever think about leaving? Megan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. To do what? Sleep. You could go somewhere better, Hayes said. Private system. Bigger budget. Newer equipment. Megan glanced at the corner of the counter, where a photo of her father sat in a cheap frame. He wore his old police uniform, in the picture younger than she remembered him now, his smile tired and proud. My dad used to say you don't leave your post because it gets ugly, Megan said. You leave when the mission is done. Hayes exhaled. And when is that? Megan did not answer. She turned back to the charting stack and kept working. The overhead speaker crackled to life with a voice from administration that always sounded too cheerful for the building it haunted. Reminder to all departments. Effective midnight discretionary overtime requires direct approval from operations. Thank you for your cooperation. Megan felt Hayes look at her. She ignored it. She could not afford to react in front of the staff who were already running on fumes. Behind her, the security guard posted near the ambulance bay an older man named Reggie, with a belly that pressed against his uniform belt, leaned in and murmured, They say that like we're choosing to drown. Megan gave him a small glance. They say it like words are free. Reggie nodded, his eyes heavy. You eat today, Nurse Hart. Not yet. He made a displeased sound. That's why you're mean. Megan's lips pressed together. I'm not mean. I'm efficient. Reggie chuckled and turned away, watching the automatic doors like he could stop the night from getting worse just by staring at it. At 11:52, the lull tried to settle in. It did not fully land. The air felt dense, charged, as if the building was waiting for an impact it could not name. Megan walked into the supply room, punched in the code, and opened the cabinet that held the trauma kits. The shelves were stripped in a way that should have been illegal. A single chest tube kit sat on the bottom shelf like an abandoned lifeboat. She took it out and held it for a second, feeling the weight. Plastic, metal, sterile packaging. The difference between breath and silence. She wrote her initials on the sign-out sheet, knowing someone in a suit would later use that signature to ask why it had been necessary. When she stepped back into the hall, she heard Kayla's voice from behind a curtain, soft and soothing, the way you talk to someone's child when you want the mother to breathe. Megan kept moving, checking the board, checking the clocks, checking the faces of her staff, the way a commander checked a perimeter. Hayes joined her near Trauma 1. "I talked to Pierce about the sensors," he said quietly. Megan did not stop walking, and Hayes's mouth tightened. He said, "If we waste less, we can hire more." Megan turned toward him. Her eyes were tired but sharp. "He is going to hire more the way a shark becomes a vegetarian." Hayes's gaze drifted toward the glass doors that led to the ambulance bay. "You're in a mood." "I am in a reality," Megan said. A call light blinked. Megan answered it, stepping into a room where the veteran who had been sleeping upright now sat forward, breathing harder. "Pain?" Megan asked. The man nodded, hand on his chest. Megan moved fast, placing fingers on his wrist, checking his skin, watching the way his eyes tracked. "When did it start?" "An hour," he rasped. "Thought it was nothing." Megan signaled Kayla with 2 fingers. Kayla appeared at the door, attentive. "Get an EKG," Megan said, "and tell Hayes we might need him." Hayes arrived before Kayla could even move the machine in. He had that look again, the one that meant the night was deciding to show its teeth. They worked the veteran quickly oxygen aspirin labs. It turned out to be acid reflux and anxiety more than infarct, but they did not scold him for coming in. Megan had seen enough men die of pride to respect fear when it finally spoke. By 11:59, the veteran was calmer. The teen with the broken leg was sleeping under a warmed blanket, and the toddler's fever had come down a fraction. Megan allowed herself 1 sip of cold coffee. It tasted like regret. Megan's phone vibrated in her pocket. She ignored it once, then slipped it out just enough to see the screen. Low balance alert. She locked it again without opening the app. Rent was due in 3 days. Her car had been hesitating on cold starts, the starter catching late like it was deciding whether to let her go home. She had promised herself she would fix it after this paycheck. Down the hall, a door opened near administration, and a polished voice carried into the ER too bright for this building. Randall Pierce appeared in the corridor in a clean dress shirt and shoes that looked like they had never met hospital grime. A tablet hugged his chest. His eyes skimmed over the tracker board, the staff, the waiting room, as if he could tally suffering. He stopped at the nurse's station. "Evening. Numbers look heavy for a Tuesday." Megan kept her pen moving. "People don't schedule emergencies." Pierce's smile stayed thin. "Directive starts at midnight. Non-emergent walk-ins get redirected to county. We are doing our part. Overtime requires approval. Discretionary supplies get minimized. We keep the doors open by being disciplined." Kayla's chair creaked as she sat up straighter. "What about pediatrics? The toddler out there has a fever." Pierce turned toward her, eyes landing on her badge. "You're new." Kayla swallowed. "Yes, sir." Pierce's tone softened into something that sounded like mentorship. "Then learn to separate urgency from emotion. You will burn out if you think you can save everyone." Megan looked up. "We burn out when we're told to stop trying." Pierce's smile twitched. "Charge, Nurse Hart. I respect your passion, but passion does not keep the lights on. Compliance does. And please remember, no freelancing. I will not have staff taking risks that expose this hospital." Dr. Nolan Hayes stood beside Megan, shoulders tight. Treating patients is the job. Pierce ignored him, already stepping away. Carry on. His shoes made no sound on the floor. Everything else in Cumberland Creek squeaked. Carts, doors, wheels. Pierce moved like he floated above it. When he was gone, Kayla let out a shaky breath. Hayes stared at his coffee like it had personally betrayed him. Megan returned to her charting, but her pen pressed harder than it needed to. Reggie, the security guard, drifted closer and murmured, "He talks like blood is optional." Megan did not smile. "For him it is." Megan glanced toward the ambulance bay doors. The glass reflected the ER lights, turning the outside into a dark mirror. For a moment she saw her own face in it, the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the tension held in her jaw. She rolled her shoulders, once reset her stance, and went back to work. Then the ambulance bay doors exploded open. The sound was not literal explosion, but it hit the room like one. Boots squealed on the linoleum. A gurney rattled across the floor, pushed by two paramedics running so hard their shoulders rocked. A third paramedic ran beside the gurney, with one hand pressing down on the patient's chest, dressing blood seeping between his fingers in dark pulses. "Trauma 1." The lead paramedic shouted, "We need Trauma 1 right now." The waiting room fell silent in the way animals go silent when a predator steps into view. Megan's body moved before her mind finished labeling what she was seeing. She vaulted the counter, her sneakers catching on the edge for a split second, then landing clean. She met the gurney, head-on, hands on the rails matching its speed. "Talk to me," she said. "What do we have?" The paramedic's voice came in broken bursts between breaths. Male about 40, multiple gunshot wounds, chest and upper thigh. Dropped at the fire station off Bragg Boulevard. No ID, no wallet. BP 60/40, heart rate 150. He's losing it. Megan's eyes flicked to the monitor. The numbers were ugly, flashing like warnings. She leaned down, scanning the patient's face. His skin was the color of ash. His lips had gone pale. He was big-built, dense, a body made for carrying weight, but right now the weight was leaving him in red. His eyes were half open, unfocused, the whites showing too much. His breathing came in sharp, uneven pulls that lifted his chest in spasms. "Move, Megan," said voice cutting through the chaos. "Trauma 1, now." They turned into the bay. The doors swung shut behind them. The room snapped into its own world of sterile light and hard sound. "Cut everything," Megan ordered. "Get me suction. Kayla, pressure on that thigh. Nolan, I need you here." Hayes was already at the sink, scrubbing his face set. Kayla took position, hands pressing down on the upper leg wound, her expression trying to stay professional, while fear pooled in her eyes. Megan pulled gloves on fast and checked the chest. The wounds were tight, grouped high-caliber holes punched through muscle and ribs with intent. Not random. Not panic. Somebody had aimed like they knew what they were doing. The patient jerked a guttural sound, scraping out of his throat, as if his body was trying to cough up the night itself. Megan leaned close. "Hey," she said low enough for him to hear. "I'm Megan. You're in the hospital. Stay with me." His eyes flickered, but he could not focus. The monitor alarmed again. Oxygen saturation dropped. Blood pressure dipped lower. A high-pitched tone whined as if the machine could not believe what it was reading. Megan's hands moved on instinct. She palpated the chest, listened with her stethoscope, felt the asymmetry. One side rose less than the other. Breath sounds were faint. "Tension pneumothorax," she said. Not a diagnosis, a warning. Hayes stepped up, gloved, ready. "You sure?" Megan looked at him. "If I'm wrong, he bleeds. If I'm right and we wait, he dies." Hayes nodded, the kind of nod that did not need words. Megan grabbed the chest tube tray, snapping it open. Instruments gleamed under the lights. She opened the sterile field with a practiced flick, the paper folding back like a curtain. Kayla's voice shook. "Pressure is dropping." Megan looked at the man again. Scars crossed his arms, old lines that spoke of injuries that had healed because he had refused to stop. But the body could only refuse for so long. "Rapid infuser," Megan called. "Blood now." An orderly rushed in with the cooler. The smell of plastic and ice hit the air. Hayes took the scalpel. Megan placed a hand on the patient's shoulder, grounding him, or maybe grounding herself. "Sir," she said, "I need you to fight for one more minute." His eyelids fluttered. His hand rose slowly, trembling, and then in a sudden surge of strength that shocked everyone, he grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron, crushing through the glove. Megan did not pull away. She leaned closer until her face was near his. His eyes found hers for half a second. They were a pale gray, clear as storm water and full of a fierce, silent plea. Hayes inhaled sharply. "He's still with us." Megan held the man's gaze. "Stay," she whispered. The monitor screamed again, louder this time. The heart rate climbed, then began to falter, fluttering toward a dangerous irregularity. Hayes raised the scalpel. Megan turned toward the tray, ready to assist, ready to move like she had moved 1,000 times before, ready to do the thing that should have been simple in a room built for saving. The trauma bay door behind them released a soft mechanical hiss. The hiss of the door was too calm for the violence in the room. Randall Pierce stepped into Trauma 1 like he belonged there. Crisp shirt, shined shoes, tablet held against his chest as if it could shield him from blood. He did not scrub, he did not gown. He did not even glance at the patient long enough to see the color draining out of him. "Stop," Pierce said. The word landed harder than the alarms. Dr. Nolan Hayes froze with the scalpel poised above a chest that barely rose. Megan turned her gloved hands hovering over the sterile field. "Get out." Pierce did not move. His eyes flicked to the monitor as if it were another spreadsheet. Registration ran him through the state intake system. "He's flagged uninsured, indigent. He's dying," Megan said. Her voice stayed level, but something sharp lived inside it. Pierce lifted the tablet. The screen glow painted his face a sickly blue. "At midnight, we go live on Directive 19C. Diversion status for non-contracted trauma. County takes transfer. We do not incur surgical costs for uninsured transportable patients." Hayes blinked like he had been slapped. "Transportable? Look at him." Pierce's tone was smooth rehearsed. "Stabilize enough for transfer. The bird is already called." Megan stared at him. "You called a helicopter." Pierce nodded once as if proud of his efficiency. "It will be here shortly. Patch him and ship him." Megan stepped closer, blocking Pierce's view of the patient like she could physically keep his words from landing. "His pressure is 60/40. His oxygen is dropping. He needs decompression now and a surgeon." Pierce's gaze slid past her, dismissive. "He needs to stop costing us money." The patient made a wet, struggling sound, and Megan felt his grip tighten around her wrist. For a heartbeat, she thought he might pull her down. Then she realized he was anchoring himself to her because the rest of his world was slipping away. His eyes found hers again, pale and desperate. "Don't let me." Megan looked back at the monitor. The rhythm wobbled. The warning tones sharpened. A long, flat note began to threaten at the edges. She turned to Hayes. "Cut." Hayes's jaw worked. He glanced at Pierce, then back at Megan. His hands trembled around the scalpel in a way Megan had never seen, not because he was afraid of blood, because he was afraid of paperwork. Pierce stepped closer, invading the sterile field with his polished shoes. "Dr. Hayes, you will not proceed. If you open him, you are initiating an unreimbursed procedure against policy. You will be personally liable for assault on an uninsured patient." Hayes stared at Pierce. "That's not how assault works." Pierce's eyes hardened. "Try me." Megan heard Kayla Monroe inhale sharply behind her, the sound caught between panic and disbelief. Megan leaned toward Pierce, her voice dropping low, dangerous, intimate. "You are going to stand there and watch him die because you want a bonus." Pierce's mouth tightened. "This hospital is a business. We keep the doors open by making difficult decisions. Step away from the patient. The patient's eyes rolled back. His grip loosened. The monitor screamed. Kayla's voice broke. He's crashing. Hayes' shoulders sank like the weight of Pierce's threat had finally landed. He lowered the scalpel. Megan, he whispered, barely audible. I can't. The flatline tone began to rise thin and merciless. Code blue, Kayla shouted. Megan did not think about rent. She did not think about the low balance alert in her pocket. She did not think about the starter motor that had been hesitating for weeks. She did not think about the last time she'd slept more than 4 hours. She thought about air. She snatched the scalpel from Hayes' frozen hand and tossed it back onto the tray. Then her right hand darted to the kit, tearing open sterile packaging with practiced violence. Her left hand pressed hard against the patient's chest, feeling the tightness, the trapped pressure, the body trying to breathe against a sealed door. Pierce's voice rose sharp with panic now that control was slipping. Nurse Hart, do not touch him. Do you hear me? Do not. Megan ignored him. She grabbed a large bore needle and drove it into the intercostal space with a precise angle she could have drawn blindfolded. For a split second there was resistance, then a release. Air hissed out like a confession. The patient's chest lifted higher. The flatline faltered. The monitor gave one lonely beep, then another, then a jagged rhythm that clung to life like a fingernail on rock. Hayes sucked in a breath. Kayla's hands shook as she held pressure on the thigh wound, eyes wide. Megan did not pause to celebrate. She ripped the chest tube kit open fully now. Suction, now, set up the drain. Kayla moved, still crying but moving. Megan opened a small incision, fingers steady, and guided the tube into place with speed, born from 1,000 nights of being the last wall between chaos and death. Blood and air bubbled through the line, a violent mix that painted the chamber red. The patient coughed a ragged sound, but his oxygen numbers began to climb. Hayes found his hands again. He moved to the head of the bed, securing airway support, voice snapping into the professional cadence he wore like armor. Bag him. Give me that. Megan, I need lines. 2 large bore, Megan said. Type and cross. Massive transfusion protocol. Stop staring and move. An orderly ran in with blood eyes wide like a kid who had wandered into the wrong movie. Megan took the cooler spike the first unit and watched the red flow into the patient's veins like borrowed time. Pierce stood behind her face, turning from anger to something colder. He looked at Megan as if she had reached into his office and set his laptop on fire. You are done, Pierce said. Megan did not turn. He's breathing. You violated directive, Pierce said. You performed a procedure beyond your scope in defiance of administrative order. Megan's hands kept moving, packing, sealing, checking. I prevented a death in front of me. That's my scope. Hayes glanced at Pierce, then at Megan. His mouth opened, as if to speak, then closed again. He looked away. Megan watched the numbers stabilize. Blood pressure climbed from the abyss to something survivable. Oxygen rose. The heart rhythm smoothed from chaos to a hard, stubborn line of life. She exhaled for the first time in what felt like an hour. He's stable. The room went quiet except for the machines. Pierce stepped forward. He did not look at the patient. Not once. His gaze stayed locked on Megan. Get out, he said. Megan finally turned. Her gloves were slick with blood. The front of her scrubs was stained dark. She met Pierce's eyes with a stare that did not blink. You're welcome, she said. Pierce's face flushed purple. Security. 2 hospital security officers appeared in the doorway, hesitant. They looked past Pierce to Megan, shame flickering in their eyes. They had seen her put her hands on 1,000 bleeding bodies. They had seen her comfort families in hallways. They had also seen the admin memos. They knew what happened to people who pushed back. Pierce pointed at Megan like she was a threat. Remove her. Megan peeled her gloves off slowly, each snap loud in the silence. She set them in the biohazard bin and stepped away from the bed. Kayla's voice trembled. Megan, no. Megan looked at her. Keep pressure. Watch the drain. Don't let them move him. Kayla nodded, tears spilling. Hayes stood rigid, eyes fixed on the floor. Megan walked out of Trauma 1 with 2 guards behind her boots, squeaking on linoleum that never quite got clean. The hallway outside was a different world full of fluorescent light and whispered fear. Staff paused, eyes darting. Someone pushed a supply cart and stopped when they saw her being escorted, then pretended to adjust a blanket to avoid witnessing it. Megan kept her chin level. She did not give Pierce the satisfaction of seeing her bend. Pierce walked ahead, moving fast, tapping on his tablet. He never looked back to see if the patient lived. The only life he cared about was his own comfort. In the administrative wing, the air changed. It smelled like printer ink and carpet cleaner instead of antiseptic. The walls were decorated with framed mission statements and glossy photos of smiling executives. The kind of smiles you practiced in mirrors. Pierce's office door closed behind them with a quiet click that felt like a lock. He sat at his desk, a heavy slab of wood that looked out of place in a hospital that needed working monitors. He did not offer Megan a chair. The guards stood near the door, eyes lowered. Pierce began typing. The keyboard clicks were rapid and angry. Insubordination, he said without looking up. Practicing medicine without authorization. Reckless endangerment. Misuse of hospital resources. Megan stood still, blood drying on her sleeves. I saved his life. Pierce kept typing. You cost this hospital tens of thousands of dollars. Megan's voice was flat. You tried to let him die. Pierce's eyes lifted slowly. I tried to protect this institution. Megan laughed, once short and humorless. You protected your bonus. Pierce's mouth tightened. You do not get to speak to me like that. Megan leaned forward just slightly, letting the silence do its work. I just did. Pierce's nostrils flared. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a packet of paper, sliding it across the desk like a weapon. Termination, he said. Cause, gross misconduct, sign it. Megan looked down at the line for her signature. Her name printed in neat block letters above it. The document was cold, bureaucratic, tidy. It did not mention the flat line. It did not mention the hiss of trapped air leaving a dying chest. It did not mention the gray eyes begging her not to let go. She thought about the last 12 years, the night she missed holidays because someone else's holiday ended in sirens. The morning she drove home while the sun rose and her hands still smelled like latex. The time she sat with a dying man whose family could not get there in time and held his hand because no one should leave alone. She thought about her father's voice telling her when she was younger that some lines mattered more than comfort. She picked up the pen. Pierce watched her with smug satisfaction like he had already won. Megan signed. Pierce nodded, pleased. Good, now your badge. He held out his hand. It was soft, clean, a hand that had never pressed on a bleeding wound. Megan unclipped her ID from her scrub top. The photo was old. She looked younger in it, hopeful. She had not realized she had once looked that way. She set the badge on the desk with a controlled motion. Pierce leaned back. I am filing a complaint with the state board. You will not work in this state again. You will be lucky to find a job cleaning floors. Megan's gaze did not drop. You're going to report me for saving a life. Pierce smiled thinly. For disobeying an order. Megan's voice softened, not with kindness but with certainty. You can destroy my job. You can't erase what you are. Pierce's smile faded. Get her out. The guards shifted. One of them, older, cleared his throat. Megan, I'm sorry. Megan nodded once. I know. They escorted her down the hallway, past the nurse manager's offices, past the posters about teamwork, past the framed photos of donors whose names were carved into plaques. As they approached the emergency department again, Kayla appeared, eyes swollen, wiping her hands on her scrub pants like she could scrub grief off her skin. This is wrong, Kayla said. Her voice cracked. We can petition. We can go to the news. We can strike. Megan stopped. The guards hesitated behind her. The ER noise swirled around them. Phones ringing, wheels rolling, a baby crying somewhere behind a curtain. Megan looked at Kayla, really looked at her. Young, capable, a future still possible. Don't, Megan said. Kayla shook her head, tears falling. Why not? Megan's voice lowered. Because they will take your insurance. They will make you choose between doing right and feeding your family. And you have someone coming who will need you healthy. Kayla's hand flew to her belly instinctively. Megan had noticed weeks ago. Megan noticed everything. Kayla's lips trembled. But you. Megan held her gaze. Keep your job, keep your license, and watch Bed 1, the John Doe. Pierce will try to dump him the moment he can. Kayla swallowed hard. I will. Megan nodded. Promise me. I promise. Dr. Hayes stood near the station pretending to read a chart. His shoulders were tense. His eyes did not meet Megan's. Megan walked toward him anyway, stopping close enough that he had to acknowledge her. Hayes's voice was low. Megan. She watched him waiting. His throat worked. I'm sorry. Megan let the silence stretch. You lowered the scalpel. Hayes flinched as if struck. He threatened my license. Megan nodded once slow. I know. Hayes looked at her, shame swimming in his eyes. What you did, it saved him. Megan's face stayed still, but something behind her eyes shifted. Then remember that, because they will ask you to do it again. And next time I might not be here. Hayes's mouth opened, then closed. His gaze dropped. Megan turned away before the guards could see anything in her face that looked like heartbreak. They walked her to her locker. The staff corridor smelled like sweat and bleach. Her locker door was dented from years of rushed elbows and impatient hands. She spun the dial, opened it, and stared at the small pieces of her life tucked inside. Her stethoscope hung on a hook. A photograph of her mother taken before illness hollowed her out, smiled from the inside door. A tiny cactus sat in a chipped mug, stubbornly alive under neglect. Megan took the stethoscope, first draping it around her neck out of habit. She slipped the photo into her box. She hesitated with the cactus, then took it too, cradling it carefully despite the sharp little spines. The guards waited without speaking. The quiet was heavy. It made everything feel more final. She closed the locker. The metal clanged like a period at the end of a sentence. The walk to the front doors felt longer than it should have. The ER doors whooshed open and shut as patients came and went, unaware a war had just been fought behind the curtains. A man in the waiting room looked up at Megan's box and then quickly looked away. A woman, holding her sick toddler, watched with eyes that looked like she wanted to ask if she should be afraid. Megan kept walking. At the automatic doors, the cold night air leaked in through the seams. The guards stopped. One of them, younger, shifted his weight. You need a ride. Megan shook her head. I have a car. He looked past her through the glass. It's cold. Megan's mouth tightened. I'm used to cold. The older guard swallowed. We didn't want this. Megan's gaze softened just a fraction. I know. Go do your job. Protect the people who come in. That's the part that still matters. The doors slid open, and the night hit her like a physical thing. Outside, the parking lot lights cast everything in a sick yellow glow. The air smelled like damp asphalt and exhaust. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, then faded, as if even the city was tired. Megan walked toward her sedan, her box heavy in her arms. Each step felt like it belonged to someone else. She reached the car and set the box on the hood. The metal was cold enough to sting through the cardboard. For a moment, she just stood there, hands resting on the edge of the box, staring at the windshield. She could see her own reflection, faintly distorted by grime and light. She thought about calling her father. She thought about the rent. She thought about the bank alert. She thought about the man in Trauma 1 still alive because she refused to be quiet. She opened the driver's side door and slid in. The seat smelled like stale coffee and the faint citrus of old air freshener. Familiar. Small. Safe in a way the hospital had stopped being. She set the box on the passenger seat. Her fingers found the key. She stared at it for a second longer than she needed to, as if the simple act of turning it might change her life again. Then she pushed it into the ignition and turned. The engine clicked. Nothing else happened. Megan closed her eyes and drew in a slow breath through her nose, steadying herself the way she had steadied 1,000 patients. She turned the key again. Click. Megan held the key turned all the way over, as if willpower could coax the starter to catch. The dashboard lights glowed weak and apologetic. When she let go, the key snapped back and the silence returned, thick as wet cloth. She tried again. Click, click. A sound rose in the distance so low, at first it could have been the highway or wind. But it had a rhythm, a heavy, repeating pulse that didn't belong to traffic. Megan stopped turning the key. The sound grew. It pushed into her chest, vibrating through the steering column, making the rearview mirror tremble. She looked up through the windshield. 2 dark shapes slipped over the tree line north of the hospital, flying low enough to be reckless, fast enough to be deliberate. No running lights. No public markings. Matte, black bodies that swallowed the parking lot glow instead of reflecting it. Her mouth went dry. The lead helicopter banked hard and dropped toward the hospital like a predator committing to a strike. The second followed tight formation, same angle, same intent. Rotor wash hit the parking lot a second later and turned dust into a storm. Loose trash skittered. A row of shopping carts slammed together like bones. Inside, the hospital lights in the lobby jittered with vibration. A distant alarm began to wail as if the building itself was trying to protest. Megan shoved the car door open and stepped out into the gale, one arm up to shield her face. The cardboard box on the passenger seat shifted, and a corner folded in. Her stethoscope slid metal, catching the light for a second. The cactus trembled in its chipped mug. The first helicopter touched down hard enough to rattle Megan's teeth. The landing gear compressed and rebounded. The rotors did not slow. They kept biting at the air, churning it, shredding it, keeping the machine ready to lift again at a moment's notice. A spotlight snapped on from the helicopter belly and pinned the parking lot in white glare. Megan squinted, vision tearing in the wind. The side door slid open. 6 figures jumped out. They hit the asphalt running. Black tactical gear. Covered faces. Rifles held close and controlled, pointed down but ready. Their movement had a strange quiet to it, even under the roar, like their bodies didn't waste motion. Megan backed into her car, palm raised without thinking. Her other hand hovered near the doorframe as if the thin metal could protect her. One of them broke from the group and sprinted straight toward her. He stopped 5 feet away and did something that surprised her. He slung his rifle behind him in one smooth motion. Then he ripped off his face covering. Young. Late 20s. Eyes hollowed by exhaustion. He shouted, but even shouting looked like it cost him. "Are you medical staff?" Megan swallowed grit. Not anymore. His eyebrows tightened, confusion and urgency colliding. "I don't care about your employment status. Are you a trauma nurse?" Megan hesitated only long enough to feel her heart slam once. "Yes." He keyed a radio clipped to his vest. "Command, I have a local asset in the landing zone. Female identifies as trauma nurse." A crackle answered in his earpiece. He listened, eyes locked on Megan like he was afraid she might vanish. "What's your name?" he shouted. "Megan." He shook his head sharply. "Last name." Megan's voice came out flat. "Hart, Megan Hart." The man froze. His eyes widened as if the name carried weight heavier than the helicopter's. He leaned closer, voice pleading through the wind. "Confirm again." Megan Hart. He turned his head slightly, listening to his earpiece. Then he looked back at her with a mix of relief and disbelief that cut through her fear. "Ma'am, you need to come with us. Now." Megan's stomach turned cold. "No." She backed a step heel, catching on a crack in the asphalt. "I'm not going anywhere with strangers who land helicopters in a hospital parking lot." The man's jaw clenched. "We're not here for you." His voice shook when he said the next part, like he was trying not to break in front of her. "We're here for the patient you admitted." Megan's breath caught. Her mind snapped back to trauma 1. Gray eyes. A chest that finally rose. Blood in the chamber. The rhythm returning. "The John Doe," she said. The man nodded hard. His vitals are crashing again. Our medic was hit during extraction. We have no clinical support on site. Megan stared at him. There are doctors inside. He looked towards the hospital doors. Security lights flickered as staff pressed to the glass to see what was happening. Somewhere inside, a scream rose and cut off. "We don't trust them," the man said. "We intercepted comms. Your administrator ordered a transfer that would kill him. We're not letting that happen." Megan's throat tightened. "Who are you?" The man took a breath and shouted the answer like it was the only truth that mattered. "Sentinel Ridge Solutions." Megan felt the name slide across her memory like a piece of news she'd heard once and forgotten. Private security. The kind that operated in war zones, not parking lots. He continued, voice cracking. "The patient's name is Captain Ethan Cross, United States Marine Corps, retired." Megan blinked. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," he said, and there was grief under the urgency. "He's my brother." The second helicopter landed behind the first. The ground shook again. A new group of operators poured out, moving toward the hospital entrance in a straight line, rifles slung tight heads down against the wind. A taller man stepped down last. He wore the same gear, but carried it like it was part of his skeleton. His face covering stayed on. His gaze swept the parking lot once, then locked onto Megan. He strode toward her, and the younger operator stepped aside like the man outranked the air itself. The tall man stopped in front of Megan and pulled off his face covering. Older than the first. Mid-30s. Hard eyes. A thin scar cut through one eyebrow. He looked like someone who had been awake in violence longer than he'd been asleep in peace. "I'm Logan Cross," he said, voice low enough that Megan could hear it even through the rotors. "Ethan is inside that building. He is bleeding out, and he is asking for you." Megan swallowed. "He doesn't know me." Logan's stare didn't move. He knows the voice that told him to stay. He knows the hands that kept him alive when everyone else stepped back. Megan felt heat rise behind her eyes. Anger and exhaustion twisting together. "They fired me." Logan glanced at the hospital entrance where security now clustered with their hands near their belts, radios in fists. "I know." Megan shook her head. "You can't just take over a hospital." Logan's expression did not change. "We can take our patient." Megan's voice sharpened. "He's unstable. You move him wrong and he dies on your stretcher." Logan leaned slightly closer. "Then you come with us, and you keep him alive." Megan looked past Logan to the hospital doors. She could picture Pierce in his office still typing her termination into existence like a man stamping paperwork made him powerful. She could picture Kayla's hands shaking as she tried to keep pressure on a wound without enough supplies. She could picture Hayes lowering his scalpel. She looked back at Logan. "I need a crash kit. I need suction. I need blood. And I need you to make sure your people do not touch staff unless they come at us." Logan nodded once, sharp, done. Megan set her hand on the car door. Her fingers were shaking now that fear had a place to land. "And Pierce doesn't touch me." Logan's eyes went cold. "If he touches you, he loses the hand." Megan took a breath that tasted like dust and jet fuel. "Then move." Logan pivoted and barked orders into his radio. The words were clipped code threaded through them. Two operators ran to the ambulance bay doors. Another rushed back toward the helicopter and returned with a hard case that looked like it belonged in a combat zone, not a hospital parking lot. Megan stepped away from her dead car. She did not look back at the box on the seat. She didn't trust herself to. They moved fast toward the entrance. The automatic doors did not open. One of the operators slammed the butt of his rifle into the glass sensor housing. The doors jolted. A second kick hit the seam where the door met the track. Glass spiderwebbed, then shattered in a rain of safety cubes. The doors blew inward. Megan flinched as shards skittered across the tile. The lobby exploded into motion. Patients screamed. A receptionist ducked under the desk. A man in a wheelchair tried to back away, hands lifted. Hospital security ran in from the side corridor, radios squawking. Megan pushed through the broken doorway with Logan at her shoulder. The wind followed them inside, carrying dust and the smell of kerosene into the sterile air. In the center of the hallway stood Randall Pierce. He looked smaller outside his office. Still polished. Still holding his tablet like scripture. But the skin around his eyes was tight and pale. He pointed at Megan as if she'd returned from exile to haunt him. "I fired you," Pierce shouted. His voice cracked under the rotor thrum shaking the building. "You are trespassing. Security, arrest her." 2 hospital guards stood behind Pierce. Megan recognized them from years of night shifts. They looked at the rifles in the operator's hands, then looked at their own belts with flashlights and radios and nothing else. Neither guard moved. Pierce's face flushed. "Do it." One guard swallowed. "Sir, I'm not doing that." Pierce spun toward him, coward. Then Pierce stepped forward himself, arrogance pushing him where survival should have stopped him. "You cannot bring weapons into a healthcare facility," Pierce yelled at Logan. "This is a federal violation. I am calling the police." Logan did not slow. He walked straight up to Pierce until Pierce had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. "Step aside," Logan said. Pierce's chin lifted. "That patient is uninsured. He is not staying in this hospital." Logan's eyes narrowed. "He is leaving." Pierce jabbed the tablet in the air like a judge's gavel. "Over my authority." Logan's hand moved. It was fast, brutal, controlled. He grabbed Pierce by the lapels and lifted him off the ground like Pierce weighed nothing at all. Pierce's feet dangled and kicked against the air. His tablet clattered to the floor and slid across the tile. Logan slammed Pierce against the wall. The sound was a wet thud that made nearby staff flinch. Pierce gasped, eyes bulging. "You can't." Logan leaned in until his voice became something Pierce could feel. "That man you called a vagrant is Ethan Cross." Pierce's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Logan continued. "He is the chief executive of Sentinel Ridge Solutions. He is worth more money than this hospital will see in a decade." Pierce's face strained further, turning the color of paper. Logan dropped him. Pierce slid down the wall and coughed, one hand clawing at his own throat. The hallway went silent except for the distant alarms and the rotors shaking the building. Megan stepped over Pierce's legs without looking down. Her eyes were on the trauma bay doors. Inside Trauma 1, the world had continued without her, and it was losing. Kayla stood at the head of the bed, bagging the patient by hand, tears running down her cheeks, her shoulders trembling with effort. Hayes stood near the side, hands half raised like he was trapped between what he wanted to do and what he'd been told he wasn't allowed to. The monitor screamed in chaotic tones. Megan's voice cut through it. "What's happening?" Hayes looked up. Relief flashed across his face so hard it looked like pain. "He's bleeding into the drain again." Kayla choked on a sob. "The chamber's filling." Megan rushed to the bedside. Ethan Cross lay, pale skin, clammy eyes half open. His chest rose shallowly. His lips moved as if he was trying to form words that couldn't survive the blood loss. His gray eyes tracked to Megan. For a moment, the chaos narrowed to that stare. "You came back," he rasped, voice thin and shredded. Megan pulled gloves on hands steady because there was no room for anything else. "I don't leave patients unfinished." Hayes's voice came out tight. "I think a fragment nicked something. An intercostal artery." Pierce forbade reopening. Megan turned her head toward the door. She could see Pierce in the hallway now, still coughing, staring at the scene like a man watching his own control evaporate. Megan faced Hayes again. "Get me a vascular clamp, 20 silk." Hayes hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Pierce. Megan's voice dropped sharp. "Be a doctor." Hayes swallowed. Then his gaze hardened, something waking behind it. He moved to the tray hands, finding speed. Megan leaned in and assessed the drain. Bright red blood. Fresh. Not old, not slowing. "Pressure's dropping," Kayla said, voice shaking. 70/30. Megan didn't answer. She opened the incision site around the chest tube with quick, precise movement, widening just enough. Her fingers went in. Warm. Slick. The cavity felt like a tight living space fighting to collapse. Megan worked blind, guided by touch and rhythm, tracking where the bleeding pulsed against her fingertips. Hayes handed her the clamp. Here. Megan's jaw clenched. Her eyes stayed on Ethan's face. Stay with me. Ethan's eyelids fluttered. Megan found it. A spurt against her index finger. A tiny violent pulse that felt like a fountain trying to empty a body. I got it, she said, voice low. She slid the clamp down, guided by instinct, honed over a decade of night shift disasters. Metal met vessel. Click. The suction chamber stopped filling. Kayla sucked in a breath. It stopped. Megan tied it off with silk fingers, moving fast, not clean and tight. The monitor shifted. The alarms softened. Blood pressure climbed like a man hauling himself out of water. 80/50, Kayla whispered, almost afraid to say it. Megan withdrew her hands, blood coating her gloves. He's stable for transport. Logan appeared in the doorway, eyes scanning the patient, then Megan. How long? Megan looked at the drain, looked at the IV lines, looked at Ethan's face. Minutes matter, she said. If you lift him wrong, he bleeds again. I need him secured flat. No sudden elevation. Logan nodded once and barked to his team. Operators moved into the room like they were trained for this. They rolled in a collapsible tactical stretcher, straps and anchors designed to keep a body stable under movement. Megan watched them work. Efficient, quiet, not medical, but not careless. Hayes stepped aside, hands hovering as if he wanted to help, but didn't know if he had permission anymore. Megan looked at him. Hold the lines. Hayes moved instantly, gripping the IV tubing, protecting it from pulling loose. His hands were steady now. His eyes didn't go to Pierce. They transferred Ethan carefully, inch by inch, keeping his chest level. Megan monitored the drain and the monitor like a hawk watching a breath. When Ethan was secured, Logan nodded. Move. The hallway outside had filled with staff. Nurses and techs lined the walls, faces pale, eyes wide. Some stared at the rifles. Some stared at Megan. Pierce stumbled toward them, phone in hand, voice high and frantic. 911. There are armed men. They are kidnapping a patient. Megan stepped into his path. Pierce's eyes snapped to her, wild with rage and fear. You did this. Megan's voice was calm. You tried to kill him. Pierce sputtered. I followed policy. Megan stepped closer until Pierce had to stop retreating or collide with the wall. You followed your bonus. Pierce lifted the phone like a shield. The police are coming. Megan reached out, plucked the phone from his hand, ended the call with one clean tap, and dropped the device into a biohazard bin filled with contaminated waste. The plastic thudded softly among bloody gauze. Pierce's mouth fell open. Megan leaned in just enough. Move. Pierce moved. The operators pushed the stretcher out through the broken doors into the night. Rotor wash slapped them, immediately cold and violent. Megan ran alongside the stretcher, one hand on the rail, the other protecting the drain and tubing. Her hair whipped across her face. Grit stung her eyes. Load, Logan shouted. They slid the stretcher into the belly of the helicopter. Megan climbed in after it without thinking, boots hitting the metal floor, hands already reaching for Ethan's monitor leads. Logan followed, then two operators, then the younger man from the parking lot, his face tight with focus. The cabin smelled like oil, metal, and sweat. Red tactical lights painted everything in bruised shadows. The rotors roared above her like a constant threat. Megan snapped a headset onto her ears as someone shoved it into her hand. The roar dulled into a heavy hum, replaced by radio chatter and the pilot's clipped voice. Package secured, the pilot said, lifting. The helicopter shuddered, then rose. The floor tilted. Megan braced her knees against the stretcher, eyes locked on Ethan's chest, watching for any change in drainage, any shift in breathing. Through the open door, Cumberland Creek Medical Center shrank into a bright box in the darkness. The parking lot lights blurred. Megan caught a glimpse of her sedan sitting alone under the lamp driver door. Still open, her box still on the passenger seat like a life left behind. The helicopter banked away. Megan turned back to Ethan. His face was pale. His lips parted slightly. His breathing was assisted but steady. The monitor showed a rhythm that held. Megan checked his pulse with 2 fingers. It was weak, but present. She exhaled slowly, then glanced up at Logan. "Where are you taking him?" she asked. Logan's voice came through her headset low and controlled. "Home." Megan stared at him. "That means nothing." Logan's eyes flicked to the cockpit, then back. "It means not here." The pilot's voice cut in. "Control, this is Viper 1. We are outbound. 2 birds, low altitude." A crackle answered. "Be advised, unrecognized contacts to your south. Maintain terrain masking." Megan's spine tightened. "Contacts." Logan's jaw flexed. "Eyes on your patient." Megan looked down. Ethan's heart rate had begun to climb. 110. 120. Oxygen dipped a few points. The helicopter vibrated harder as it dropped lower. Treetops rushed beneath them. Darkness swallowed the horizon. Megan leaned over Ethan, adjusting the flow rate, checking sedation. "Stay still," she murmured, even though he couldn't hear her clearly. "Don't fight." The aircraft banked sharply. Megan's shoulder hit the wall. She grabbed the stretcher rail, keeping her body between Ethan and the impact. An operator near the door shouted something toward the cockpit. Megan could not hear the words through the headset, but she felt the urgency in his posture. The pilot's voice came tight. "Radar lock. Deploying countermeasures." The helicopter shuddered again. A series of dull thumps hit the air behind them as flares launched bright enough to flood the cabin with white pulses through the small windows. Megan's eyes stayed on the monitor. Ethan's heart rate spiked, 140, 150. The chest tube drain chamber began to fill again. Bright red. Fresh. Megan's mouth went dry. No. She leaned closer, hand on the tubing, watching the flow increase. "He's bleeding again," she said sharply. Logan turned toward her, eyes hard. "From what?" Megan looked at the drain, then at Ethan's chest, then at the way the helicopter kept throwing them sideways. "From the movement." "You're tearing clot, you're jostling him." The pilot's voice snapped through. "I'm not jostling him for fun. We've got a hunter drone on us." Megan lifted her head toward the cockpit. "Then stop flying like a pinball machine. If I fly straight, we get hit," the pilot shot back. Megan looked down at Ethan. The drain filled faster. The monitor began to alarm. She spoke into the mic with a calm that came from the ER, not from comfort. "If you don't fly straight, he bleeds out in 5 minutes." Silence hit the cabin for half a second. Even the operators paused, hearing the weight of the choice. Logan's gaze went to Ethan, then to Megan. Megan did not blink. Her hand stayed on the tubing, ready to clamp if she had to. Logan's voice was low, level out. The pilot hesitated. "Sir?" Logan's eyes did not move. Level out. The helicopter steadied. The wild banking stopped. The vibration smoothed into a steady, dangerous hum. Megan felt the difference instantly. She also felt the exposure. No more terrain masking, no more erratic maneuvers. Just a straight path through open darkness. Megan didn't look at the windows. She stayed with Ethan. "I need light," she said. An operator clicked on a tactical flashlight and aimed it at Ethan's chest. The beam was harsh and tight. Megan grabbed a pressure dressing from the hard case beside her. She pressed her palm against the tube site, feeling the wet warmth seeping through. She didn't have a sterile field. She didn't have a surgical suite. She had a vibrating metal box in the sky and a man losing blood. She packed the dressing around the tube site, pushing it deep, creating pressure, forcing the bleeding to slow by brute physics. Ethan groaned, under sedation, body arching slightly. Megan pushed harder, forearms burning. "Stay with me," she whispered close to his ear. "Don't quit." The pilot's voice came tight again. 1 minute, lock tone. Megan pressed down until her shoulders shook. She watched the drain chamber. The flow slowed. Not stopped, but slowed. Ethan's heart rate began to drop. 160 down to 150. Oxygen steadied. Megan held the pressure like she was holding the world in place. Ethan's hand rose suddenly, weak but deliberate, and closed around Megan's forearm. His eyes opened glassy with pain. He looked at her, then toward Logan. His voice was a rasp through dry lips. "Logan." Logan leaned in face inches from his brother. "I'm here." Ethan's eyes flicked back to Megan. "Get her safe." Megan swallowed. "We're all getting safe." The pilot shouted, voice sharp with adrenaline. Missile launch detected. The helicopter rolled hard. Megan's harness caught her as the floor became a wall. Her shoulders slammed into the ceiling panel. The flashlight beam skittered wild. Flares erupted again. The cabin flashed white. A boom hit them. Not direct. Close enough to punch the air out of Megan's lungs. Shrapnel pinged against the hull like hail. The helicopter shook, engine whining in protest, then surged forward as the pilot dove into lower terrain. The sound changed. The air pressure shifted. The cabin rattled as they dropped into a valley. The pilot's voice came through strained and exhilarated. "We're clear." Megan hung in her harness for a moment, breath coming in short pulls. Then the helicopter leveled out, and she dropped back onto the seat hard enough to bruise. Her hand was still on Ethan's chest, still pressing the dressing in place. She checked the monitor. The rhythm held. The oxygen number climbed back into the safe range. Megan exhaled slowly, forcing her hands not to shake. Logan unbuckled and moved closer, placing a steadying hand on the stretcher rail. His eyes met Megan's. "You didn't freeze," he said. Megan wiped blood from her cheek with the back of her glove and left a smear. "I work nights in Fayetteville. I've seen people shoot each other over a parking space." Logan made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had warmth. "Welcome to Sentinel Ridge." Megan kept her palm pressed down. "I'm not part of anything." Logan looked away toward the window where dark canyon walls slid by close enough to feel. "You're part of keeping him alive." The helicopter flew low and fast through the valley, the walls eating radar, swallowing the night. The cabin lights stayed red. The operators checked weapons and radios with quiet discipline. Megan stayed over Ethan, monitoring every breath, every beep, every milliliter in the chamber. After long minutes of steady flight, the vibration changed again as the pilot began a careful climb. Megan felt it in her stomach. She tightened her pressure, watching for renewed bleeding. The drain stayed stable. Logan spoke into his radio. "Control Viper 1. Patient stabilized. Nurse maintaining." The crackle answered. "Copy. Landing pad is hot. Medical bay is ready." Megan looked up at Logan. "Medical bay." He nodded. "We have a facility." The helicopter began to descend. Through a small window, Megan saw lights appear ahead, arranged in disciplined lines. High walls, watchtowers, a compound built into the dark like it had grown there. The landing gear touched concrete with a heavy thud. The rotors kept spinning. Operators moved with speed, opening the door, preparing the stretcher. Megan unbuckled and climbed out with her hand still protecting the tube site and IV lines. The air outside was colder here, cleaner smelling of pine and stone instead of asphalt. They ran the stretcher across the pad toward a steel door set into the mountain face. It opened before they reached it, revealing a corridor washed in bright white light. Inside, the air smelled different. Sterile, new, expensive. Megan heard the rotors fade as the door sealed behind them. A man in scrubs appeared, eyes flicking to Logan, then to Megan, then to Ethan. "He's in surgery prep." Logan's voice was short. "Get the thoracic suite ready." The medic hesitated. "Dr. Park is still overseas." Logan looked at Megan. "He's online." Megan stared at Ethan's pale face, then at the corridor ahead, then at the gleaming equipment rolling toward them. She tightened her grip on the stretcher rail and kept moving. The corridor swallowed the outside world the moment the steel door sealed behind them. The roar of rotor blades disappeared like someone had cut the sound with a knife. In its place came the quiet hum of ventilation, the soft whir of cameras tracking movement, and the steady rhythm of boots on polished concrete. Megan ran beside the stretcher, one hand protecting the chest tube line, the other braced on the rail as operators pushed Ethan Cross through the white light. The air smelled like antiseptic and something metallic like new equipment straight out of packaging. Everything here felt too clean, too controlled, as if chaos was a thing that happened only to other people. A woman in surgical scrubs met them at the first intersection. She moved like she belonged to this place, hair-tucked eyes, sharp hands already gloved. Vitals, she said, matching stride without breaking pace. Megan kept her gaze on the monitor. Heart rate 128. Pressure 92/55. Oxygen 94 unassisted. Active bleed slowed with pressure dressing, but the chest drain is still bright. The woman nodded once. Name. Ethan Cross, Logan said, and the way he said it wasn't a title. It was a prayer with teeth. The woman's eyes flicked to Logan, then back to the patient. Prep room is ready. We have blood. Anesthesia is standing by. Megan heard the words blood and anesthesia and felt a fraction of tension loosen in her ribs. Her hands stayed firm on the line. They burst into a wide bay that looked like an operating suite designed by someone who hated hospitals. No beige walls. No stained tile. Stainless steel surfaces sealed, lighting monitors mounted on articulated arms. A surgical robot stood in a corner like a silent animal, cables, tucked joints locked. The stretcher rolled under bright lights. A team moved in efficient and quiet, not the frantic scramble of an ER, but the cold competence of people trained to work under pressure without showing it. Transfer on 3, the scrub woman said. Megan watched every inch of movement as they shifted Ethan to the table. She kept the drain level, kept the IV from snagging, kept the pressure dressing pressed into place until the last possible second. Ethan's eyelids fluttered. His mouth opened slightly and a breath came out like he was trying to speak, but didn't have enough air to shape words. Megan leaned close. "You're not dying on my watch," she said softly. His pale gray eyes cracked open and found her. There was awareness there even through pain. He tightened his fingers around her forearm with what little strength he had left. Logan stood at the edge of the lights, arms crossed, shoulders tense. The operators behind him stayed still, rifles no longer visible, but their presence heavy in the room. A man in dark scrubs stepped forward. He wore an earpiece and carried a tablet with a live feed. His eyes flicked between Megan and the monitors like he was collecting data. "Dr. Park is online," he said. Megan's head snapped toward him. "Now." The man nodded and turned the tablet toward the wall screen. The screen flickered, then stabilized into a face framed by a bright room. A surgeon in blue scrubs appeared, late 40s, calm eyes, posture controlled. Behind him, a bank of monitors glowed. He looked like someone who had spent his life making decisions people didn't get to question. Megan Hart, Dr. Daniel Park, said, voice clear through the speakers. "You are the trauma nurse." Megan swallowed. "Yes." His gaze didn't soften. It sharpened. "You are not a surgeon." Megan's jaw set. "No." Dr. Park nodded like that was a fact, not an insult. "Then listen carefully. In this room, you follow my commands. You speak when you see something I cannot. You do not improvise unless you have to." Megan glanced at the robot in the corner. "Why are you not using the robotic system?" A man at the anesthesia station answered before Park did. "Shielding is active. Some systems are offline." Dr. Park continued without reacting to the explanation. "Mr. Cross has a lacerated lung. He has fluid accumulating around the heart. If we do not address both he arrests, you will open the chest." Megan felt the floor tilt slightly under her feet like the helicopter had followed her inside. She kept her face neutral because too many eyes were watching. Logan's voice came low from the edge of the lights. "Can she do it?" Megan looked at Logan. She could see the fear in him under the discipline. The kind of fear that didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't show itself except in the way he didn't blink. Dr. Park answered like a man cutting through smoke. "If she does not, your brother dies." Megan turned back to the screen. "Tell me what you need." Dr. Park's gaze held her for a beat longer, then he nodded once. "Scrub in." Megan moved to the sink. The water ran hot enough to sting the soap, harsh, the antiseptic smell biting. She scrubbed until her hands felt raw, until the memory of Fayetteville blood and helicopter kerosene faded under chemical burn. She glanced up at the mirror above the sink. Her eyes looked different than they had at midnight. Less tired, more sharp. The kind of sharp that came when your body stopped asking how and started demanding now. She dried, gloved, gowned. Her breath stayed slow and controlled because her hands needed to be steady, and her hands were everything in this room. She stepped back into the operating light. "Position," Dr. Park said. Megan moved to Ethan's right side. The drape covered most of him, leaving a window of battered chest exposed. Bruising bloomed under the skin like ink. The chest tube site was ugly, the dressing packed tight around it. The anesthesia monitor chirped softly. A medic adjusted a line. Someone checked the ventilator settings. Megan glanced once toward Logan. He stood behind a glass partition now in an observation area, hands on the rail, like he could physically hold the room together. His eyes stayed locked on Ethan. "Megan," Dr. Park said. Megan looked back to the screen. "Scalpel," Park commanded. A scrub tech placed the instrument in Megan's hand. The metal felt heavier than it should have. Megan lowered the tip to skin. For a fraction of a second she felt the hesitance that came with knowing the next movement could not be undone. Then she cut. The blade slid through skin with a clean resistance. The first line of blood appeared bright and thin. Megan widened the incision under Park's direction, layer by layer, suction clearing the field as the tech moved the tip in and out. "Good," Park said. "Retractor." The retractor opened the incision metal arms, spreading tissue to reveal deeper layers. Megan's breathing stayed even. Her vision narrowed to the field. Red, pink, white, the glint of rib. "Rib spreader," Park said. Megan placed it. The mechanical crank turned. The chest opened with a grim patience that no movie ever showed honestly. The smell changed. It became warmer, iron-rich, alive. Megan felt a flicker of nausea in her throat and crushed it before it could grow. Not because she couldn't handle blood, because this was different. This was crossing a line that the state board and hospital policies would have loved to put in a file. "Do not think about anything outside the field," Dr. Park said, as if reading her mind through a camera. "Focus." Megan focused. The lung came into view, wet and bruised, a torn edge leaking air and blood. Suction worked constantly. The heartbeat behind the pericardium, a relentless motion that didn't care about the room. "Locate the laceration," Park said. Megan leaned in. Her gloved fingers touched tissue, gently mapping by feel. She found the tear, a jagged wound along the lung surface. "Confirmed," Megan said. "Clamp and suture," Park replied. Megan took the needle driver. Her hands moved with controlled speed, the same speed she used in the ER when seconds mattered, but now the precision demanded was merciless. She drove the needle through delicate tissue, pulled the suture tight-tied. Again, again. Each stitch a promise that had to hold under breath. Blood pooled. Suction cleared. The field narrowed. "Pressure dropped," the anesthesia medic said. Megan's eyes flicked to the monitor. The blood pressure slid down. "Bleeding," Park said, not as a question. Megan scanned. A vessel pulsed, a small one but active. She clamped it. The bleeding slowed. "Good," Park said. "Now pericardium." Megan's throat tightened. The heart looked close enough to touch because it was. Park's voice stayed calm. "There is fluid compressing it. You will open the pericardial sac carefully. You will drain. Do not cut the myocardium. If you cut it, there is no fixing that in this room." Megan's mouth went dry. Understood. She positioned the instrument with a delicacy that felt like trying to sew in an earthquake. The heart continued to beat, indifferent. Megan made a small incision in the pericardial sac. A rush of fluid escaped, dark and thin, and the heart's motion immediately looked freer, less constrained. "Drain," Park commanded. Suction pulled the fluid away. Pressure numbers climbed back. "Better," the anesthesia medic murmured. Megan didn't respond. She couldn't spare the breath. Minutes blurred into a tight tunnel of instruction and movement. Park's voice kept time. Incision. Retract. Suction. Clamp. Suture. Check. Again. Twice, Megan hit a vessel she didn't see in time. Blood surged and obscured everything. "Do not panic," Park said sharply. Megan didn't panic. She did what the ER had trained into her bones. She compressed. She suctioned. She found the source by feel and clamped it blind, trusting her fingertips the way she trusted her eyes when the lights went out. The bleeding stopped. Her shoulders ached. Sweat pooled under her gown. Her back burned from leaning over the open chest. Logan's voice came faint through the observation intercom. "How is he?" No one answered him. Park spoke instead after another series of sutures held. "Lung seal is acceptable. Pericardial decompression complete. Prepare to close." Megan's hand slowed only slightly, the kind of slow that came from fatigue, not hesitation. She began closing in layers, stitch after stitch, working until the opening became a line again, then a seam. The final staples clicked into place like the punctuation at the end of a long sentence. "Vitals," Megan said, voice hoarse. The anesthesia monitor chirped. Blood pressure 110/70. Oxygen 98. Heart rate 90. Megan stepped back, and for the first time in hours, she realized her legs were trembling. She peeled off her outer gloves. Her fingers were wrinkled from sweat and antiseptic, the skin raw around the knuckles. Her mask felt too tight. She tugged it down and drew a breath that didn't taste like helicopter fuel. She had been holding something inside her all night. Now it cracked. Megan sank against the wall and slid down until she hit the floor. The cold of the tile seeped through her scrubs. It felt real. It felt like proof that she was still here. The door opened. Logan walked in from the observation area, still in tactical gear rifle, slung eyes scanning corners the way soldiers did even in a sterile room. "He's alive," Megan said, voice flat with exhaustion. Logan's face didn't change. He walked to the monitor, stared at the numbers, and only then did his shoulders drop a fraction. He looked down at Ethan on the table, now draped and quiet, the steady rhythm of the ventilator rising and falling. Logan's voice came low. "You did that." Megan didn't want praise. Praise felt too light for what it cost. "He did the fighting. I just kept him from falling." Logan's jaw flexed. "You need to stay here." Megan blinked, confusion cutting through fatigue. "The surgery is done." Logan's eyes were hard as stone. "Lock the door from the inside." Megan pushed herself to her feet slowly. "Why?" Logan moved closer. Voice dropping. "We analyzed the drone intercept. It did not track us from Fayetteville. It engaged us on a vector that suggests it launched within a 10-mile radius of this mountain." Megan felt the blood drain from her face. "That means someone here knew." Logan nodded once, grim. "We have a traitor." He stepped toward the door and checked the lock panel fingers fast and practiced. "No one comes in here. Not my men, not maintenance, not cleaning, nobody." Megan's mind tried to catch up. "Ethan's your CEO. Your people would die for him." Logan looked at her with a cold honesty. "People die for money, too." He reached into a pouch and pulled out a pistol. Matte black. Heavy. He pressed it into Megan's palm. Megan stared at it like it was a foreign language. Her hands still smelled like antiseptic. They were hands that held pressure. Started lines, stitched skin, pressed on chests. Not hands that ended lives. Megan said, voice tight, "I save lives." Logan's gaze didn't move. "Tonight, you might have to protect one." Megan swallowed. "I'm not trained for this." Logan's voice stayed low controlled. "Your father was law enforcement. You told Park you could follow orders. Follow this one. If that door opens and it is not me, you fire." Megan's stomach clenched. "Until when?" Logan didn't answer the question. He tapped the side of the pistol. "Safety. Trigger discipline. Aim center mass. Do not hesitate. Hesitation is how people die." Megan's fingers tightened around the grip. The weight of it felt wrong and inevitable. Logan stepped toward the door. "You are the only person I know for a fact is not compromised." Megan's throat tightened. "How do you know?" Logan paused, his face hardening with something that almost looked like respect. "Because you lost everything to save him, and you came back anyway." He looked once at Ethan, then back at Megan. "Lock it." Then he left. The heavy steel door sealed with a pneumatic thud. The lock engaged with a quiet electronic chirp. Megan stood alone in the operating suite with a billionaire on a ventilator and a gun in her hand. The first half hour passed with the slow drag of adrenaline draining away. The room's noise became a collection of small sounds. The gentle hiss of oxygen, the soft ticking of infusion pumps, the distant hum of facility ventilation beyond the walls. Megan checked Ethan's vitals every 5 minutes. Her eyes flicked between heart rate, pressure, oxygen, and tidal. She adjusted sedation, listened to breath sounds, checked the chest drain for fresh flow. Each time she looked at the door, her grip tightened on the pistol. She tried to set it down once on a tray near the instruments, but her hand refused to open. It felt like letting go would be an invitation. An hour passed, then another. Megan's body ached in places she didn't have names for. The rawness in her hands burned when she flexed her fingers. She swallowed dry, forcing herself to stay alert. The suite lights stayed steady. The world outside the door stayed unknown. Then the lights went out. Not a flicker. Not a dim. A hard cut that erased the room. The ventilator hum stopped. For a split second, Megan's heart stuttered as if it was trying to follow the power down. Then, the monitors switched to battery backup, their screens glowing eerie green and blue in the sudden darkness. Infusion pumps beeped a warning. The room smelled different without the ventilation, warmer, more human. Megan moved fast to Ethan's bedside hand, checking his pulse eyes, scanning the monitor. The numbers held, but the oxygen saturation dipped a point. She listened. The ventilator had stopped. She reached for the ambu bag and began manual ventilation, squeezing steadily, watching the chest rise and fall. Her forearms began to burn almost immediately. She kept the rhythm anyway. A sound came from above. Clank, metal on metal. Megan froze mid-squeeze. Another sound softer, like screws turning. The ventilation grill above the supply closet shifted. Her father's voice cut through memory, quiet and clear. "Don't aim with your eyes, aim with your body." Megan set the ambu bag down carefully and watched Ethan's chest. He was still breathing on his own, shallow but present. The saturation held. She stepped back into the darkness, pistol raised, both hands on the grip, like she'd seen in training videos she never thought she'd need. Her elbows bent her shoulders tight. She moved behind the surgical robot for cover, crouching low. The vent cover loosened. A pair of boots dropped through the opening, landing softly with a practiced bend of knees. Night vision goggles glowed faint green as the figure raised a suppressed pistol and swept the room. Megan's stomach turned cold when she recognized him. Tyler Vance, the pilot. The man whose voice had been in her headset, steady under missile warnings, casual when he talked to Logan like they'd shared beers. The man who had flown them into the valley, who had laughed once when Megan called a drone a fancy drive-by. Vance stepped toward Ethan's bed, suppressor pointed forward. His voice came low, almost gentle, distorted slightly by the goggles and the darkness. "Megan." Megan held her breath. "I know you're here," Vance said. "Don't make this messy." He paused near the bed head, tilting like he could hear her heartbeat. "Step away from the patient and you can walk out. I will even give you a car, something better than that one you left behind." Megan's fingers tightened on the grip until her knuckles ached. Vance moved closer, scanning. "Logan is sweeping the barracks right now. He is looking for a ground man. Not me." He chuckled softly. They always overlook the drivers. He reached the bedside. He raised the pistol toward Ethan's head. Megan stood. The movement felt like stepping off a cliff. "Hey," she said. Vance spun toward her, night vision lenses flashing. His suppressed pistol snapped up. Megan fired. The recoil jolted up her arms hard enough to make her shoulders scream. The shot went wide, shattering a glass cabinet. Saline bags burst and sprayed liquid, raining across the floor like cold tears. Vance ducked. He fired back twice, quick and controlled. The rounds sparked off metal as Megan dropped behind the robot again. Vance's voice turned sharp, stupid. Megan's hands shook, but her breath stayed steady in the way it did when a patient coded. She peeked around the robot's edge, pistol up. Vance stepped sideways, trying to flank. "You're a nurse," he said. "You don't have the stomach for this." Megan's voice came out rough. "I deal with blood every day." She fired again. This time the shot hit. Vance grunted a sudden ugly sound and stumbled. His leg buckled. He dropped to one knee, one hand gripping his thigh. The suppressed pistol stayed trained on Megan. His voice hissed through pain. "You just made this worse." Megan's arms felt like they were made of fire. She kept the gun up. Why? Vance's teeth showed. 10 million reasons. Megan's throat tightened. Who? Vance laughed once, breathless. Does it matter? Ethan is bad for business. He keeps sticking his nose into places that pay better when they stay dark. He shifted, trying to steady his aim. Step out, drop it. You can still walk away. Megan didn't move. The pistol in her hands felt less like a weapon now and more like an anchor keeping her from being swept aside. Ethan's monitor beeped steady behind them, indifferent to betrayal. Vance's finger began to squeeze the trigger. The door exploded. Not opened, breached. A directional charge blew the hinges inward with a concussive crack that shoved air across the room. Smoke rolled in thick and white. Megan flinched, ears ringing. Logan stormed through the smoke like something pulled from a nightmare. He didn't fire. He didn't hesitate. He saw Vance kneeling, gun raised, and his brother unconscious on the bed. Logan crossed the distance in 2 strides and drove his boot into Vance's chest. Vance flew backward, skidding across the wet floor, his pistol clattering away. Logan was on him immediately, knee-pinning him down. Vance tried to reach for a backup blade. Logan stomped his wrist. Bone snapped. Vance screamed a raw sound that scraped through the room. Logan grabbed Vance by the collar and yanked him close, his face inches away, voice shaking with rage, held barely in check. "You flew him." Vance spit blood. It was business. Logan's eyes burned. "You ate at our table." Vance's laugh came broken. "They offered 10 million. I said yes." Logan lifted his rifle barrel, aimed at Vance's forehead. Megan stepped forward, voice cutting through the moment. "Logan?" Logan froze. His finger hovered, tension visible in the tendons of his hand. Megan kept her pistol lowered, now pointed at the floor, but her voice stayed steady. "He needs to talk." Logan's jaw flexed like he was chewing on the thought. He already talked. Megan shook her head once. Not enough. Logan's eyes flicked to Megan. "He tried to kill your patient. He tried to kill your brother," Megan corrected. And the words hit the room like a blunt object. "If you kill him now, you don't get names, you don't get networks, you don't get who paid him, and Ethan stays a target." Logan stared at her, rage fighting calculation. For a long second, the only sound was the monitors beeping in the darkness and Vance's ragged breathing. Logan lowered the rifle slightly. Then he swung the stock hard into Vance's temple. Vance went limp, eyes rolling back, body collapsing. Logan stood and barked into his radio. "Secure him. Get the power back." Operators flooded the room, zip ties out, checking corners, sweeping the vent. The lights flickered once, then returned. Ventilation surged back to life, pushing smoke toward the exhaust. Megan's hands began to shake now that the immediate danger had passed. The delayed tremor of adrenaline. She set the pistol down carefully on a tray, like she was afraid it might explode if she treated it casually. Logan stepped toward her. For the first time since the hospital parking lot, he looked tired. He reached out and caught Megan's hands, gently steadying them. His grip was firm, but not forceful. "You held the line," Logan said. Megan swallowed, eyes locked on the floor where Vance lay unconscious. "I missed the first shot." Logan's mouth tightened. "You didn't miss the second." Megan's throat worked. "I didn't want to do that." Logan's voice softened a fraction. "Nobody wants to. That's what makes it different from the people who do." Megan pulled her hands back slowly and looked at Ethan. He lay still, chest rising and falling. Skin pale, under the lights, staples across his chest like a brutal seam. The monitor showed steady rhythm. Megan stepped to the bedside and checked the drain again. Minimal output. Darker now. Slower. She listened to breath sounds. They were rough but present. Her shoulders sagged just slightly. "He's stable." Logan nodded once and turned to his men. "Move Vance." 2 operators lifted Vance and dragged him out without ceremony. Another operator checked the lock panel on the door and nodded at Logan. "Control has the corridor. no movement. Logan looked back at Megan. Stay with him. Megan didn't argue. She didn't have the energy to argue. She pulled a stool to the bedside and sat, eyes never leaving the monitor. Her hands were still trembling, but they were back where they belonged now, hovering near tubing and lines instead of triggers. Logan stood at the door, watching her for a beat longer than necessary, then stepped out. The door sealed again, but this time Megan could hear boots and voices in the corridor. She wasn't alone in the facility anymore. Not truly. She leaned in close to Ethan's ear, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'd better wake up," she said. "People are killing for the chance to stop you." She watched his chest rise, fall, rise again. The monitors kept their steady song, and in that steady sound, Megan finally felt the night shift inside her loosen its grip just enough for her to breathe. Megan stayed on the stool until her legs went numb. The facility's lights were back to full brightness, now clean and steady, as if the blackout had never happened. The only proof it had was the smell of burned wiring still faint in the air, and the thin red scratch on Megan's knuckle, where she had scraped metal when she ducked behind the surgical robot. Ethan Cross lay under crisp sheets ventilator, hissing softly, chest rising and falling with a rhythm that finally looked like it belonged to a living man instead of a countdown. The staples across his torso caught the overhead light when Megan shifted. The drain chamber hung beside the bed. The fluid inside darker now, slower, no longer racing like it was trying to empty him. The door opened without the violence of a breach this time. Logan stepped in with two operators behind him. Their weapons were slung, their posture tight, their eyes moving. Logan's gaze went first to his brother, then to Megan, then to the tray where the pistol sat. "Good," he said quietly. Megan's voice came out rough. "He's stable." One of the operators crossed to the wall panel and checked the electrical readouts. Another checked the vent cover above the supply closet, replacing screws with quick, practiced hands. The room returned to normal piece by piece. Logan moved closer to Ethan's bedside. He didn't touch him at first. He simply stood there, watching the monitor, watching the numbers stay where they should. Megan saw something shift behind Logan's eyes. Relief didn't look like a smile on him. It looked like his shoulders lowering half an inch. "We've got Vance secured," Logan said. "He's in containment. He's awake." Megan swallowed. The name still felt like a betrayal in her mouth. He said 10 million. Logan nodded once. "He'll tell us where it came from." Megan looked down at her hands. The trembling had finally faded, replaced by a deep ache that lived in the bones. "I don't want to hear him talk. I want to forget he exists." Logan's mouth tightened. "That's not a luxury we get." Megan didn't answer. She turned her eyes back to Ethan. The steady line on the monitor held. The ventilator hissed. The machines did what they were built to do, quietly, without judgment. Logan looked at Megan. "You're staying here." Megan lifted her gaze. "I'm not your employee." Logan's voice stayed calm. "You don't have a job to go back to, and you don't have a safe place tonight." Megan's jaw flexed. "I have a home." Logan didn't argue. "We'll get you there when it's clear." Megan felt the truth of it settle into her. Her car sat dead in a hospital lot that had become a crime scene of broken glass and rumors. Her badge was on Pierce's desk. Her bank account was still low. Her hands still smelled like antiseptic and gunpowder. Logan's eyes flicked toward the screen above the sink where a security feed showed a corridor with operators posted at intervals, quiet silhouettes in white light. "Until then, you eat, you sleep, you let medical clear you." Megan stared at him. "Medical?" Logan's mouth twitched, not quite amusement. "Yes, we have protocols too." He turned toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Megan Hart, you did something most people don't do." Megan's voice stayed flat. "You mean I shot a man?" Logan's gaze didn't move. "You stood in front of a situation that was bigger than you and you didn't step aside." Megan didn't let herself respond to that. She shifted on the stool and reached for Ethan's wrist, checking his pulse the old way, not trusting machines alone. It was stronger than it had been. The skin under her fingers was warm. Logan watched her for a beat, then left the door sealing behind him with a quiet click. Megan stayed there until the sun rose somewhere outside the mountain. and the facility's lighting shifted slightly as if even an underground compound had its own idea of morning. When Ethan finally woke, it wasn't dramatic. No sudden gasp, no heroic sit-up. His eyelids fluttered. His hand twitched. The ventilator settings adjusted as his breathing tried to take ownership again. Megan leaned in, watching his face for signs of pain, confusion, fear. His eyes opened, gray, clear, focused. They found Megan immediately. For a long second, he didn't speak. He just looked at her like he was verifying she was real. Then his voice came out hoarse, raw from tubes and trauma. "You," Megan exhaled slowly. "Yeah, me." His brow tightened as if he was trying to assemble memory through fog. "They said you were fired." Megan's mouth went tight. "I was." His gaze sharpened despite the weakness in his body. "For saving me." Megan did not soften the truth. "For disobeying the guy who thought you were expendable." Ethan's eyes closed for a moment. A slow breath. Then he opened them again and looked at the staples on his own chest, as if he could feel every stitch. "Logan," he rasped. Logan appeared in the doorway instantly, as if he'd been waiting just outside the frame of Megan's life. He moved to Ethan's bedside and leaned close. "You're awake." Ethan's lips pressed together. "Vance." Logan's jaw tightened. He secured. Ethan's eyes flicked to Megan. "Did he hurt you?" Megan shook her head once. He tried. Ethan's gaze held hers. A quiet understanding passed between them that didn't need words. Ethan swallowed, throat working around dryness. "Thank you." Megan's voice came out rougher than she wanted. "Don't thank me. You're the one who took bullets." Ethan's eyes stayed steady. "You took consequences." Megan looked away first. A nurse in crisp scrubs entered, checking vitals, adjusting lines. The facility's medical staff moved with practiced calm, but Megan noticed the way their eyes flicked to Ethan with a different kind of attention. This wasn't just a patient to them. This was the center of their universe. When the staff left again, Ethan spoke quietly. "What is your situation?" Megan laughed once, humorless. "You mean my life?" Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "Yes." Megan didn't want pity. Pity felt like a chain. But she didn't lie. No job, no badge, probably a board complaint waiting. "My car died in the parking lot. I have rent due." Logan's expression hardened as if those facts were another set of injuries. Ethan's face remained calm, but something in his eyes sharpened. The administrator. Randall Pierce. Megan's shoulders lifted slightly, then fell. "He's still there." Ethan stared at the ceiling for a moment, breathing slow. "Not for long." Megan looked at him. "I'm not asking for revenge." Ethan's eyes returned to her. "I'm not offering revenge." He paused, then spoke with the quiet certainty of a man used to moving large pieces on a board. "I'm offering correction." Megan didn't answer. She wasn't sure what correction looked like in a world where hospitals ran on budgets and fear. Ethan's gaze softened, just slightly. "You want to go back to being a nurse who gets overruled by someone who has never held pressure on a bleeding artery." Megan's throat tightened. "I want patients to live." Ethan nodded once. "Then we're aligned." 3 weeks later, the morning sun hit the glass facade of Cumberland Creek Medical Center and made the place look almost new from the street. Light could be cruel like that. It could make a failing building look healthy. Inside, nothing was healthy. The lobby smelled faintly of old carpet and cheap air freshener. The receptionist's smile was strained. A handwritten sign near the front desk said the cafeteria would be closed for maintenance. It had been closed for maintenance for months. Rumors moved faster than stretchers. A private equity group had bought the hospital's debt. People whispered about layoffs. Nurses checked their schedules with tight faces. Doctors spoke in low voices near the medication room, wondering who would be next to lose coverage, whose department would be cut, which services would be considered non-essential. Dr. Nolan Hayes stood near the nurse station and watched a supply cart roll past with half-empty bins. A CT tech walked by and shook her head at him. Still, one scanner still broken down twice a day. The kind of broken that never got fixed, because fixing it meant admitting someone had been lying about priorities. Kayla. Monroe tightened her ponytail and stared at the shift board. She looked older than she had 3 weeks ago, not because time passed, because stress had a way of compressing people. She saw Hayes and stepped closer. Any word. Hayes kept his voice low, nothing solid. Kayla swallowed. If they lay people off, I'm done. I can't lose the insurance. Hayes didn't tell her it would be okay. He didn't have that kind of currency, just do your job today. Kayla nodded, eyes flicking toward Trauma 1 as if she expected the doors to burst open again. On the administrative floor, Randall Pierce marched fast through the hallway, suit jacket on tie tight. Sweat darkened the collar of his dress shirt, even though the air conditioning in his wing worked better than anywhere else in the building. He carried a tablet and a binder full of spreadsheets. He looked like a man walking into a performance convinced the applause was inevitable. His assistant hurried beside him. They're waiting in the boardroom. Pierce didn't slow. Good. They'll see I've stabilized operating costs. They'll see I know how to run a hospital. His assistant hesitated. They asked for the incident reports, too. Pierce's mouth tightened. Everything is in compliance. That nurse went rogue. The transfer protocols are standard. He pushed open the double doors to the boardroom and stepped inside. Gentlemen. Pierce began, voice bright with practiced confidence. I have the third quarter projections right here. He stopped. At the head of the table sat a man in a black turtleneck and a charcoal blazer, pale but upright hands resting calmly on the arms of a wheelchair. His hair was neatly cut. His face was hard in a way that looked earned, not styled. His eyes were the same pale gray Pierce had seen in Trauma 1, though Pierce hadn't truly looked at them then. Ethan Cross. To Ethan's right stood a woman in a navy suit, hair pulled back, clean, posture straight. No scrubs, no badge, just a steady expression and eyes that didn't flinch. Megan Hart. Pierce's tablet slipped from his hands. It hit the boardroom floor and shattered the glass spider webbing like the trauma bay doors had. Pierce's throat worked. His mouth opened and closed once before words came out. You. Ethan's gaze stayed calm. Captain Ethan Cross, United States Marine Corps, retired. Pierce stared at him as if the title itself was a weapon. You're the John Doe. Ethan nodded slightly, yes. Pierce's eyes snapped to Megan, and you. Megan's voice was steady. Hello, Randall. Pierce's face flushed. You were terminated. Megan didn't blink. I was. Pierce's gaze darted around the table, seeking allies. Men in suits sat along the polished wood, their expressions unreadable, their attention fixed. Pierce forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This is some kind of misunderstanding. If you're here about the incident, I can explain. We were following policy. Ethan placed a thick file on the table. The sound of it landing was quiet, but it carried. We reviewed your policies. Pierce's smile tightened. Who are you? Ethan's eyes didn't move. The majority shareholder of Cumberland Creek Medical Center's parent network as of this morning. Pierce's face drained. That's not possible. One of the men in suits on Ethan's left slid a document across the table without speaking. Pierce's eyes dropped to it, scanning numbers and signatures. His hands began to tremble. Ethan's voice remained calm. It is possible. Pierce swallowed hard, trying to regain footing. Then I welcome you. I've worked tirelessly to keep this hospital afloat. Cost-cutting was necessary. Discipline was necessary. Without my decisions, these doors would have closed. Megan stepped forward slightly and placed her own folder on the table. It was thinner than Ethan's, but heavier in another way. Pierce looked at it like it might bite. Megan opened it and turned it so Pierce could see the top page. Names, dates, case numbers, complaints filed. Pierce's voice cracked. What is this? Megan's eyes stayed steady. Wrongful death filings. 14 families. Pierce's mouth went dry. 14. Megan's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Transfers ordered under your diversion memos. Patients you classified as transportable when they were unstable. Delays caused by supply restrictions. reuse directives that resulted in missed hypoxia. It's documented. Pierce shook his head too fast. That's absurd. Those patients were not our responsibility. County takes indigent trauma. Ethan leaned forward slightly. They were in your building. Pierce's jaw clenched. Hospitals cannot operate on charity. Megan's gaze sharpened. Hospitals cannot operate on letting people die because they are poor. Pierce's hands tightened into fists. I followed the law. Ethan's voice lowered a fraction. You followed your bonus structure. Pierce's eyes flashed with anger. I saved $300,000 last year. Megan's expression didn't change. And 14 people died doing it. A silence settled over the room. Not the awkward silence of a meeting, the heavy silence of a verdict. Pierce tried to stand taller, but his body betrayed him. He looked smaller now, cornered. This is a witch hunt. That nurse acted outside protocol. She assaulted a patient. Megan's eyes narrowed. I placed an emergency decompression to prevent cardiac arrest. Pierce snapped desperate. You had no authority. Megan's voice stayed flat. I had responsibility. Pierce looked to Ethan. You can't take her word over mine. She's disgruntled. She's out for revenge. Ethan's gaze stayed calm. I was awake in Trauma 1. Pierce froze. Ethan continued, voice steady. I heard you order the transfer. I felt my chest tighten while you spoke about cost. I watched her choose to act when your doctor froze. Pierce's lips parted, then closed. Megan didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply stood there the same way she had stood in the trauma bay when alarms screamed and hands shook. Ethan tapped the file in front of him. Your supply reuse directive. Your overtime restrictions. Your email threads pressuring physicians to deny procedures. Your diversion memos timed with budget cycles. It is all in here. Pierce's voice went thin. Those were administrative decisions. Ethan nodded. They were. Pierce tried one more angle voice, softening into false humility. If mistakes were made, we can correct them. I can adjust protocols. I can help you restructure. Megan's gaze stayed hard. You do not get to rebuild what you broke. Ethan pressed a button on the intercom built into the boardroom table. Security. Pierce's head snapped up. This is my hospital. Ethan looked at him. Not anymore. The doors opened. 2 men stepped in wearing suits that fit like armor. Their posture was still tactical. Their eyes scanning even in a boardroom. They moved with the quiet confidence of people who had removed threats in worse places than this. Pierce stood abruptly, chair-scraping. Get out, you can't. Megan's voice cut through him, calm and final. Randall Pierce. Pierce's eyes snapped to her. Megan held his gaze. You fired me for saving a life. Pierce's chest rose and fell fast. You trespassed. You assaulted. Megan didn't blink. You ordered death. Pierce's voice rose, cracking. I was following policy. Megan stepped closer just enough. You wrote the policy. Pierce's face contorted. You can't do this to me. Megan's voice remained level. You did it to yourself. One of the suited men placed a hand gently but firmly on Pierce's elbow. Sir, this way. Pierce jerked his arm away. I will sue. I will call the board. I will have your license. Megan's expression didn't change. The board already has your file. Pierce's breath hitched. What? Megan held his gaze. Your diversion memos. Your directives. Your interference in clinical care. It's submitted. Pierce's eyes went wide. He looked at Ethan. He looked at the men by the door. He looked at the other executives searching for someone to save him the way he had refused to save anyone else. No one moved. The suited men guided him toward the exit. Pierce stumbled, voice rising into a panicked pitch. You don't understand. You can't run a hospital like this. You can't just spend money. You'll fail. Ethan's voice followed him, calm and cold. Then we will fail with people alive. Pierce twisted his head back toward Megan as he was pulled through the doors. His face was red veins visible. You think you won. Megan watched him without flinching. I think you're done. The doors shut. His voice muffled, then disappeared down the hallway. Silence returned. Ethan turned his wheelchair, slightly wincing once as ribs shifted under healing tissue. He didn't hide the pain. He simply didn't let it control him. He looked at Megan. This place needs someone who understands what those floors feel like at midnight. Megan's jaw tightened. It needs staff, equipment, ethics. Ethan nodded. It gets all three. One of the executives cleared his throat softly. We need a plan. Megan didn't take a breath to think. She had been thinking for 12 years. First, we stop diversion for unstable patients. Second, we restock trauma supplies. Chest tubes, suction canisters, blood warmers. We fix the CT scanner and the lab turnaround. We staff nights properly. A man in a suit raised an eyebrow. That's expensive. Megan looked at him. So is death. Ethan's gaze moved around the table. We will absorb the cost. Another executive spoke cautiously. You're not expecting profit for years. Ethan's mouth twitched faintly. I'm not here for quarterly applause. Megan turned her eyes to the window. Below, the parking lot stretched out in neat, painted lines. The same lot where she'd been escorted out holding a cardboard box. The same lot where helicopters had landed and changed the shape of her life. She looked back at Ethan. Why? Ethan's eyes held hers. Because I've seen what happens when people decide some lives are optional. Megan's voice softened, almost unwilling. And you trust me to fix it. Ethan's tone was quiet. You were fired for doing what was right when it was costly. That is a rare credential. Megan's throat tightened. She didn't let it show in her voice. Then, let's get to work. An hour later, Megan walked through the emergency department with a different weight on her shoulders. Not the weight of being responsible with no authority. The weight of being responsible and finally having the power to change what kept breaking. Staff looked up as she entered. Some froze. Some whispered her name like it was a rumor becoming real. Kayla Monroe stepped out from behind the station, eyes wide. Megan. Megan met her gaze and nodded. Hi. Kayla's voice trembled. They said you were gone. Megan's eyes softened slightly. I'm here. Kayla's face crumpled, and she pulled Megan into a quick hug before she could stop herself. Megan hesitated for half a second, then hugged back, firm grounding. Kayla smelled like antiseptic and stress and the cheap lotion nurses used to keep their hands from splitting. When Kayla pulled back, tears clung to her lashes. Did you come to clean house? Megan looked around the department. At the worn floors, the half-stocked carts, the staff who looked tired in their bones. I came to rebuild, she said. Dr. Nolan Hayes appeared from a patient bay chart in hand. He stopped when he saw her. His expression shifted between relief and shame and something like hope. Megan, he said quietly. Megan held his gaze. Doctor? Hayes swallowed. I heard Pierce was summoned. Megan nodded once. He was. Hayes's shoulders lowered as if a brace had been removed. What now? Megan looked at him. She didn't need speeches. She needed actions. Now you practice medicine without fear of a suit in the doorway. Hayes's eyes tightened. And you, Megan's voice stayed steady. I'm not asking you to be brave all the time. I'm asking you to be brave when it matters. Hayes nodded slowly, the kind of nod that held a promise. A supply cart rolled in behind them, pushed by a tech with a clipboard. The bins were full. Sealed kits stacked neatly. New pulse ox sensors in boxes. A case of suction canisters. Kayla's mouth fell open. No way. Megan watched the cart stop and felt something in her chest loosen that she hadn't realized was clenched. A paramedic called from the bay doors. Incoming, MVC, 2 minutes. The familiar tension in the department shifted, but it didn't spike into panic. People moved. Purpose returned to their steps. Megan stepped toward Trauma 1. The doors were intact now, glass-repaired hinges solid. She could still hear the echo of alarms in her memory, but memory was not in charge today. She looked back once at Kayla and Hayes. Let's work. They moved with her. The doors to the ambulance bay burst open, and the gurney rolled in siren echo, still clinging to the air. Megan met it head-on, hands on the rails, voice clear. "Talk to me," she said. And the night shift that had once exiled her now followed her lead.